Hey guys, welcome back to the Brik House. Lincoln Brik here with week 3 of the Pokemon Unite Celestial Rumble solo queue patch tier list, name still work in progress. Empoleon had released in Unite to flying colors, one could say, and had already received his emergency nerf, which we will be going over today, as well as a few other Pokemon who will be moving up and down. So if you enjoy the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. And without further ado, let's get right into the tier list. So for this week, Empoleon came out, and honestly was such a big deal, it was kind of hard to play some of these other Pokemon. It's no secret that when he was released, he did extremely high amounts of damage. They've nerfed him recently with an emergency nerf, and hopefully that is something that kind of keep him in line and have some dull enough damage. And he was an easy pick for our S tier right before these emergency patches came in. However, I think we'll just put him at the top of our solid pick for right now. He may as well be that must play that we got at this point. However, it's still a little bit of time we gotta see if these nerfs were enough, because his damage and lifesteal for that late game was just incredible, and there's definitely hard for any other all-rounder, let alone Pokemon in the game, to compare to. So with Empoleon out of the way, we will move on to our next Pokemon, which is Pikachu. So Pikachu has been a pretty consistent pick for at least picking up a new Pokemon with its fairly easy playstyle and incredible zoning ability. However, Pikachu does lack a proper escape and these defenses, which are very needed, especially since we have all of these all-rounders kind of running rampant and doing so well in the game. Pikachu is definitely feeling the effect of that currently right now, and we've seen a pretty significant win rate fall in Pikachu these last couple weeks. So we're going to be moving Pikachu down to our not bad tier still. We'll put him in front of Glaceon. It's still a pretty solid pick, even as a support pick if you're kind of focusing on getting your CC and AoE off instead of dealing the most damage on your team. Although the meta we currently have is definitely not one that benefits Pikachu right now, and even when going a support attacker, there's a couple better options. And a better option is actually one we're going to go through next, which is Delphox. Now, Delphox is a fairly hard Pokemon to kind of get going with Fennekin and Braixen being fairly weak first and second stage Pokemon in the game, requiring a lot of support just to get to that Delphox stage. However, once you get there and you got access to your Fire Spin, or even like have your Unite move, your fanciful fireworks out, the potential that you're going to be providing for your team is honestly insane. And one benefit that Delphox has that some of these other attackers don't really have is just that ability to run support. And we're going to kind of see for this week that these attackers who can kind of focus on not being that #1 damage dealer on your team and doing more of like an EXP share or CCing the enemy team, those kinds of Pokemon are doing a lot better. And being said, we're going to be moving up Delphox just under Miraidon in our not bad tier. It's definitely a lot of potential when you're playing Pokemon like Delphox. And on that note, we will also be moving up Alolan Ninetales slightly, still keeping it above Delphox. Alolan Ninetales only has one evolution, and it's only at level 5, which is extremely quick, so it's very easy to get online as Alolan Ninetales. And it's only a few more levels after that until you have all your abilities up. And again, a support that can run the EXP share. A Curse Incense is also a very good option depending on how many supports are on the other team. And even running items like the Energy Amplifier to increase that cooldown on your Unite move is definitely going to be something your team is going to love. And what I definitely recommend running if you're going to be playing these kind of attackers in the current meta. The next Pokemon I want to talk about is Tyranitar, who has been actually doing a lot better since these map changes. One big issue that Trevenant used to have is the fact that it took so long just to get to that final stage, and now that it's a lot easier to get these levels up, there's a lot more objectives you can farm up to kind of get you those boost in levels. Trevenant is doing a lot better, and a lot of these 3-stage Pokemon who kind of took a while to evolve, they did kind of get a little bit of a boost being able to get online quicker with this new Groudon map we have. Tyranitar just was struggling so hard in that last map, and it really is nice to see that there are some changes that indirectly buff Tyranitar, as he's an extremely fun Pokemon to play. It's definitely a Pokemon where when you get to that final stage evolution, it definitely feels like all the time it took to get there was worth it. So we're going to be putting Tyranitar for the first time in the not bad tier. We'll just put him at the bottom right now. We will also be moving Machamp slightly up, but we'll be putting him right under Gyarados. Machamp is definitely, again, another 3-stage Pokemon who is doing a lot better under these map changes, giving him a lot more versatility and opportunities to kind of get into those team fights and give the team an all-out pummeling, sorry for the bad pun. And as long as you are farming up, getting those Indeedis and Bunnelbees, if you find yourself falling behind, it's fairly easy now to get yourself right back into that game with just a little bit of patience. And another Pokemon I will be moving up in this not bad tier is also Mimikyu, who we will be putting just behind Machamp. More so to say that Gyarados has just not been that impressive as of recently. It looked like it had a lot of damage when they, a couple patches ago at this point, gave it that boost to its Aqua Tail and everything. However, it's just way too inconsistent with how it is to evolve right now. It's just becoming increasingly hard to recommend when Pokemon like Machamp and Metagross are being played a lot more frequently. The next Pokemon we will be moving is Pawmot, who, when released, was a little bit on the weak side, although had some emergency buffs that made it look like a fairly solid pick. Very capable of dealing a lot of damage. However, its win rate does actually remain a little bit unimpressive, hovering around the 48 to 49% right now. It does still have a higher play rate because it is technically one of those newer releases, which does influx those win rates a little bit, although it still hasn't been that threatening Pokemon, especially, comparing it to a release like Empoleon, where you can clearly see the night and day difference between these two. Pawmot, still a fairly good pick, although we will be moving him down. I think we'll still keep him in our solid pick tier. He's not too bad of a Pokemon right now, although we'll put him just at the very end and kind of see how he does in this next week. So that's going to do it for our all-rounders, and now we're going to move on to our defenders, and the first one we're going to talk about is actually Greedent. Now, Greedent is one of the more odd defenders to play in the game. It works a bit differently than the typical distraction heavy CC defenders that we have in the game currently, and always was a harder kind of recommendation to pick up for people trying to find a new Pokemon because of that. However, being said, this Groudon map is definitely beneficial for Greedent. Greedent is a very mobile defender who's able to get into the enemy team's jungle, backdoor some points, and then get to the objective, all within the span of like 30 seconds, right? So with the new map being so objective focused and having these different points of interest that you're going to need to check in on, Pokemon that are very prone to counter jungling, such as Greedent, have seen an incredible increase in their win rate, as just being able to set behind the jungler or just annoy that attacker for the entire laning phase has become a strategy that's more than viable, and a Pokemon that you may actually want to try out in the future. Greedent had been rocking in a could be better tier for a couple weeks now, although he will be officially moving up to our not bad tier. We'll put him right above Mamoswine right now, and we'll kind of keep an eye on some of these defenders as these weeks go on, because it still remains a very tight race amongst all these defenders, and the only thing I can say for certain is that Slowbro is the worst of them all. Being said, we will also be slightly moving up Trevenant just to the top of the solid pick tier. We'll still keep Ho-Oh as our must play for this week, although Trevenant, you're right, Trevenant is right behind Ho-Oh. It's giving Curse that stun ability has just completely changed how this Pokemon initiates, and the amount of survivability Trevenant has now gained in these team fights is honestly monstrous. We're now going to be moving on to the supports, and we only have one we're going to be talking about today, which is Psyduck. Now, Psyduck has had quite the rough couple weeks. It had gotten a few nerfs to its move kit, and it had its win rate kind of drop pretty dramatically. In this last week, we've actually seen a pretty substantial rise in its win rate. Part of this has to do with some of these all-rounder pairings that Psyduck actually goes really well with. Psyduck is a Pokemon with a lot of stunts and displacement, and that is something that all-rounders like Empoleon absolutely strive off of, as it's making the opponent unable to move is just free damage and lifesteal, and Empoleon's going to get off of them. Psyduck also being a ranged support makes it easy to stand behind Pokemon like Empoleon and Blaziken, and making him a fairly consistent supporter who can also support those all-rounders just as well as the attackers. So just a slight adjustment from Psyduck for this week. We'll put him just at the top of our solid pick tier, right above Wigglytuff and Blissey. Honestly, a pretty close toss-up between all three of them, and it's really that supports that are able to just kind of shut down the enemy all-rounder are becoming increasingly useful, as this meta is just continuously dominated by all of these all-rounders. So that's going to be the tier list for this week. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of these placements, or if any Pokemon you think are too high. Again, I was very much debating whether or not to put Empoleon in that must-play tier. If those emergency nerfs never happened, it would be obviously a no-brainer must-play. However, since it's only just about a day or two since those nerfs, we still have to see a little bit more on how Empoleon's going to stack up, although it does seem it's still extremely good and a complete menace in that mid to late game. So a Pokemon to watch out for, and maybe insta-ban if you ever go into those ranked games. Anyways guys, I've been Lincoln Brik. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. So before we finish the video, I just want to go over the poll that I put up last week, where I asked you guys if Pokemon Unite was the first MOBA that you had played. In case you are unaware, a MOBA is just a multiplayer online battle arena. Games like League of Legends, Genshin Impact, Overwatch all classify as types of MOBAs, and really the goal of a MOBA is just to take down the enemy team's base or do as much damage as possible. In Pokemon Unite's case, score more points than the enemy team. So at least everybody does know if they played a MOBA. We've had 8% ask whether it's a MOBA, 28% had said that this is not their first MOBA, and a whopping 64% have said that yes, Pokemon Unite is their first MOBA. It is a good reminder to be a little bit more patient with some of these teammates that you might have on your team, as this is their first time playing a MOBA. MOBAs have a lot of ins and outs about them. They're very strategy heavy games, ones that really do kind of punish players who go in willy-nilly without a kind of clear goal in mind. So something to keep in mind when playing future Unite games. Thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to stay nasty. I have to look through my phone because I don't even know a single Linkin Park song to make a pun. Oh yeah, in the end. In the brick. We're in the brick now. That's so bad.